The big concert hall was quiet now. All the people had gone home after the show. The lights were turned down low, making long shadows across the empty seats. Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart slowly down the long rows of red velvet chairs. Her shoes made soft sounds on the shiny marble floor. Maria had been cleaning this place for 15 years. She knew every corner, every seat, every spot that needed extra care. The cart's wheels squeaked a little as she moved. Inside the cart were all her cleaning things. Bottles of spray, clean rags, a vacuum cleaner, and a mop that had seen better days. The stage stood in front of her like a mountain. It was huge and empty now. During the day, this place was full of music and people. Famous musicians came here to play. Rich people came here to listen. But at night, it belonged to Maria and the other cleaning workers. In the middle of the stage sat the most beautiful piano Maria had ever seen. It was a Steinway grand piano, black and shining like a mirror. The stage lights were still on, making the piano glow like something magical. Most nights, the musicians turned off all the lights before they left. Tonight, someone had forgotten. Maria stopped her cart and looked at the piano. She had seen hundreds of people play it over the years. Some were very good, some were just learning. But all of them got to sit at that beautiful instrument and make music. All of them got to touch those smooth white and black keys. She had always watched from far away. While she cleaned the seats, she would listen to the music. While she emptied the trash cans, she would watch the musicians' hands dance across the keys. While she mopped the floors, she would hear the most beautiful sounds in the world floating through the air. Maria knew she should not think about the piano too much. She was here to work, not to dream. But sometimes, late at night like this, she could not help herself. She would imagine what it would feel like to sit at that bench. She would wonder what those keys would feel like under her fingers. The concert hall was so big that her footsteps echoed when she walked. The ceiling was very high with gold decorations and crystal lights hanging down. During shows, the lights would shine bright and make everything look like a palace. Now in the dim light, it looked like a sleeping giant. Maria had grown up poor in Colombia. Her family did not have much money, but they had music. Her grandmother had taught her to love piano music when she was very small. They would listen to old records together on a tiny radio. Her grandmother would hum along and tap her fingers like she was playing piano keys. When Maria was young, she dreamed of being a musician. She would pretend to play piano on the kitchen table. She would move her fingers like she had seen on television. She would close her eyes and imagine the most beautiful music coming from her hands. But dreams cost money, and her family had none. When she grew up, she had to work to help her parents and younger brothers and sisters. She cleaned houses, worked in restaurants, and did whatever job she could find. Music became something she only heard on the radio or in places like this concert hall, where she worked but could not play. When Maria first got the job at the concert hall, she was so excited. She thought maybe she could learn something just by being around the music. She listened carefully to every rehearsal and every show. She watched the musicians' hands and tried to remember how they moved. She learned the names of songs and composers just by hearing them over and over. The other cleaning workers thought she was strange. They would talk and laugh while they worked, but Maria was always quiet, always listening. They did not understand why she cared so much about the music. To them, it was just noise that made their job harder. Maria's supervisor, Mrs. Chen, was a kind woman who had worked at the concert hall for 20 years. She noticed that Maria was different from the other cleaners. Maria was always very careful around the instruments. She never bumped into the piano or knocked over the music stands. She treated everything like it was made of glass. "You like the music, don't you?" Mrs. Chen had asked her once. Maria had nodded but said nothing. She was afraid to talk about her feelings. She was afraid that if she said too much, people would think she was getting ideas above her station. She was just a cleaning lady. The music was not for people like her, but in her heart Maria knew she belonged here. Not just as someone who cleaned up after the real musicians, but as someone who understood what the music meant. She could feel it in her chest when a sad song played. She could feel it in her feet when a happy song made her want to dance. She could feel it in her fingers when she watched someone play a song she knew. Tonight was different somehow. Maybe it was because the lights were still on, making the piano look so inviting. Maybe it was because she was extra tired and her guard was down. Maybe it was because the concert earlier had been so beautiful that it made her heart ache with longing. Maria pushed her cart closer to the stage. She was supposed to clean the audience seats first, then the stage area, But tonight she felt drawn to that piano like a magnet. She parked her cart at the bottom of the stage steps and looked up at the magnificent instrument. The piano seemed to be waiting for her. Its lid was open, showing all the strings inside that made the music. The bench was pushed back a little, like someone had just gotten up from playing. The music stand held some sheets of music that the evening's pianist had left behind. Maria knew she should start cleaning and stop dreaming. She had work to do, and morning would come too soon. She needed this job to pay for her small apartment and to send money home to her family in Colombia. She could not afford to waste time with silly dreams. But as she stood there looking at the piano, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, someday she would get to touch those keys. Maybe someday she would make music instead of just listening to it. Maybe someday her dreams would come true. For now, though, she picked up her cleaning supplies and got back to work. The dream could wait another night. Jonathan Mills ran his fingers through his dark hair as he walked quickly through the empty parking lot. He had just given one of his best performances ever, and the audience had loved every minute of it. But now he felt frustrated with himself. How could he forget his lucky bow tie? The bow tie was not expensive or fancy. It was just a simple black bow tie that his father had given him years ago. His father had worn it to his own piano concerts when Jonathan was a child. Jonathan had worn it to every important performance since he started his professional career. Tonight, he had taken it off in his dressing room and left it behind in his rush to meet friends for dinner. Jonathan was 35 years old and had been playing piano since he was 4. He had performed in concert halls all around the world. He had made recordings that people bought in stores. He had won competitions and received awards, but he was still superstitious about that old bow tie. He could not sleep tonight knowing it was sitting alone in the dressing room. The security guard at the front door recognized Jonathan and led him back into the building. Jonathan's footsteps echoed in the empty hallways as he made his way backstage. The concert hall felt completely different when it was empty. During shows it was full of energy and excitement. Now it felt like a sleeping cathedral. As Jonathan walked toward the dressing rooms, he heard a soft sound coming from the main hall. It was the squeak of wheels and the gentle swish of a mop. Someone was cleaning. Jonathan was not surprised. He knew that a team of workers came in after every show to get the place ready for the next day. Jonathan found his bow tie on the small table in his dressing room, right where he had left it. He folded it carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. As he started to leave, he heard the cleaning sounds again. For some reason, he decided to take a look at the main hall before he left. He pushed open the heavy doors that led from backstage to the concert hall. The stage lights were still on, which was unusual. Most performers turned them off when they finished playing. Jonathan made a mental note to turn them off before he left. That was when he saw her. A woman in a blue cleaning uniform was working near the stage. She had dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and moved with careful, quiet steps. She was not just rushing through her work like many people do with cleaning jobs. Instead, she seemed to be treating every surface with special care. Jonathan watched as the woman approached his piano. She had a soft cloth in her hand, and she began to gently clean the piano's surface. But the way she did it was different from how most people would clean a piano. Her movements were soft and respectful, like she was touching something precious. Most people who cleaned the piano just wiped it down quickly and moved on. This woman took her time. She cleaned each section carefully, following the curves of the instrument. She even cleaned the bench with the same gentle care. Jonathan found himself fascinated by what he was watching. The woman clearly knew that this piano was special. She was not treating it like just another piece of furniture to clean. She was treating it like the magnificent instrument it was. As he watched, Jonathan noticed something else. The woman would pause sometimes and look at the keys. She never touched them, but she would look at them with an expression that Jonathan recognized. It was the same expression he had seen on the faces of his music students when they looked at a beautiful piece of music they wanted to learn to play. It was longing. Jonathan had been performing and teaching music for many years. He had learned to read people's faces and body language. He could tell when someone really loved music and when someone was just pretending to be interested. This woman, this cleaning lady, had the look of someone who truly understood and loved music. The woman finished cleaning the piano and moved her cart to start working on the stage floor. She moved around the piano like she was walking in a sacred space. She was careful not to bump into anything or make loud noises that might disturb the peaceful feeling of the empty hall. Jonathan noticed that as the woman worked, she would occasionally glance back at the piano. It was like she could not help herself. The instrument seemed to draw her attention even when she was trying to focus on other tasks. Jonathan had seen this behavior before, but only in musicians. It was the way serious piano students looked at a beautiful piano when they were not allowed to play it. It was the way he himself had looked at pianos when he was young and had to wait his turn for lessons. But this was a cleaning lady. What would she know about playing piano? Jonathan immediately felt bad for thinking this way. Just because someone had a certain job did not mean they could not have other interests and talents. Maybe she had studied music when she was younger. Maybe she had always wanted to learn to play. Jonathan made a decision. Instead of leaving quietly, he would talk to this woman. He was curious about her story. Besides, he had always believed that music should bring people together, not keep them apart. Jonathan stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the stage. His dress shoes clicked on the marble floor and the sound echoed in the big empty space. The woman looked up from her cleaning, clearly surprised to see anyone there. "Oh," she said softly, looking nervous. "I am sorry. I did not know anyone was still here. I can come back later if you need the stage." Her voice had a slight accent that Jonathan could not immediately place. She spoke English well, but it was clearly not her first language. She seemed ready to pack up her things and leave if he asked her to. No, please do not worry," Jonathan said with a smile. "I just came back to get something I forgot. I am Jonathan Mills. I was the pianist who performed here tonight." The woman's eyes widened a little. "Your concert was beautiful," she said quietly. "I heard some of it while I was working in the back rooms. You play very well." Jonathan was pleased that she had enjoyed his performance. "Thank you. That means a lot to me. I have seen you here before, haven't I? You work here often?" "Yes, sir. My name is Maria Santos. I have been cleaning here for 15 years. Maria looked down at her hands, which were holding a cleaning cloth. She seemed uncomfortable talking to him. 15 years? Wow, that is a long time. You must have heard a lot of great music in all that time." Jonathan tried to make his voice warm and friendly so Maria would not feel nervous. "Oh yes," Maria said, and for the first time her face lit up with a small smile. "I have heard so many wonderful musicians. Classical music, jazz, folk music from different countries. Every night is like getting a free concert." Jonathan could hear the genuine love of music in her voice. His instinct had been right. This woman was not just someone who happened to work around music. She was someone who truly appreciated and understood what she was hearing. "Do you play any instruments yourself?" Jonathan asked. Maria's smile faded and she looked down again. "Oh, no, sir. I just clean. Music is for people like you, not for people like me." Jonathan felt sad when he heard this. He had spent his whole life believing that music was for everyone, not just for people who were lucky enough to afford lessons and fancy instruments. But he could understand why Maria might feel this way. Society often told people that certain things were not for them based on their jobs or their backgrounds. "I do not think that is true," Jonathan said gently. "Music is for everyone who loves it, and I can tell that you love it very much." Jonathan looked at Maria's face and saw something that made him want to learn more about her story. There was sadness in her eyes, but also something else. It was the same feeling he had seen in students who wanted to play music but were afraid to try. The stage lights made the piano look even more beautiful than usual. Jonathan had played on this particular piano many times and he knew it was special. It had a warm, rich sound that made even simple songs sound magical. Tonight, after his successful concert, he felt happy and generous. He wanted to share that feeling with someone. Maria had gone back to her cleaning, but Jonathan could see that she kept looking at the piano. She would clean a section of the stage floor, then glance at the instrument, then go back to cleaning. It was like she was trying not to look but could not help herself. Jonathan made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "You know," Jonathan said, his voice echoing softly in the big empty hall, "I have seen you here for years. Every time I perform, I notice you working nearby. You are always so careful around the instruments, especially the piano." Maria stopped cleaning and looked at him with surprise. She had not realized that any of the musicians ever noticed her. To her, they seemed to live in a completely different world from hers. "I just try to do my job well," Maria said quietly. "The piano is very expensive. I do not want to damage anything. It is more than that, Jonathan said. I have watched you. You treat the piano like it is alive, like it has feelings. Most people who clean around instruments just see them as objects, but you see them as something special. Maria felt her cheeks get warm. She had never thought anyone was watching her work. She had always tried to be invisible, to do her job without bothering the important people who made music. Jonathan walked closer to the piano and ran his hand along its smooth surface. This piano has been played by some of the greatest musicians in the world. But do you know what I think? I think it gets lonely sometimes. I think it wants to be played by different people, not just the same professionals over and over. Maria did not know what to say. Was this famous pianist really talking to her about the piano's feelings? It seemed impossible, but his voice sounded serious. I have been thinking, Jonathan continued, about something my first piano teacher told me when I was very young. She said that pianos choose their players as much as players choose their pianos. She said that some people have a natural connection with the instrument, even if they have never had formal lessons. Jonathan paused and looked directly at Maria. I have a feeling that you might be one of those people. Maria's heart started beating faster. What was he trying to say? She gripped her cleaning cloth tighter and shook her head. Oh no, sir. I do not know how to play piano. I have never had lessons. I am just a cleaning lady. Jonathan smiled. Just a cleaning lady? Maria, I have been in this business for a long time. I have met many people who had all the best teachers and the most expensive instruments, but they never learned to truly love music. And I have met people who had nothing but somehow understood music better than anyone else. He gestured toward the piano. This instrument does not care about your job or your education or how much money you have. It only cares about whether you have music in your heart, and I can tell that you do. Maria felt tears starting to form in her eyes. No one had ever talked to her like this before. No one had ever suggested that she might be capable of making music. But I do not know how to read music, she said. I do not know the right way to sit or how to move my fingers. Those are things that can be learned, Jonathan said. But having music in your soul, that cannot be taught. Either you have it or you do not. And you have it. Jonathan looked around the empty concert hall. The place felt magical tonight, like anything could happen. He had just finished one of the best performances of his career, and he was feeling bold and adventurous. Maria, he said, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. Maria held her breath, waiting. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to play this piano? Have you ever imagined sitting at this bench and touching these keys? Maria could not lie. She had imagined it thousands of times. Every day she worked here, she dreamed about what it would be like to make music instead of just listening to it. Yes, she whispered, I have wondered. Jonathan felt excited. He could see in Maria's eyes that she was telling the truth. Then why do we not find out? What do you mean? Maria asked, though she thought she knew what he was suggesting. I mean, why do we not see what happens when you sit at this piano? Just for a minute? Just to satisfy our curiosity. Maria's eyes grew wide. Oh, I could not. What if someone sees? What if I damage the piano? What if you discover that you have been meant to play music your whole life? Jonathan interrupted gently. What if you find out that all these years of listening and watching have taught you more than you realize? Maria looked at the piano, then back at Jonathan. You really think I should try? I do not just think you should try, Jonathan said with a grin. I think you need to try. I think this piano has been waiting for you for 15 years. He walked over to the bench and pulled it out a little from the piano. Come on, what is the worst that could happen? You play a few notes, we find out you are not ready yet, and we both go home with a good story. But what if the opposite happens? What if you sit down and magic happens? Maria set down her cleaning cloth with trembling hands. She had spent 15 years dreaming about this moment, but now that it was here, she felt terrified. I do not know any songs, she said. You do not need to know songs, Jonathan replied. Just touch the keys. See what happens. Trust your instincts. Maria walked slowly toward the piano. Each step felt like she was walking toward her destiny. She had cleaned around this instrument thousands of times, but she had never been this close to actually sitting at it. What if I am terrible? She asked. Jonathan laughed. Then you will be terrible for about 30 seconds, and then we will both laugh about it. But Maria, I have a feeling that is not going to happen. Maria reached the piano bench. It was black and shiny with a soft cushion on top. She had seen hundreds of musicians sit on this bench, but she had never imagined herself here. Go ahead, Jonathan said softly. Sit down. Maria looked at him one more time, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of joke or trick. But his expression was kind and encouraging. He really wanted her to try. Taking a deep breath, Maria slowly sat down on the piano bench. The cushion was soft and comfortable. She was now sitting where all the great musicians had sat. She could hardly believe it was real. The piano keys stretched out in front of her like a row of perfect white and black teeth. They looked so clean and bright under the stage lights. Maria had imagined touching them so many times, but now they were right there in front of her. How does it feel? Jonathan asked. Scary, Maria said honestly, but also right, like I belong here. Jonathan nodded. That is exactly how it should feel. Now put your hands on the keys. Do not worry about playing anything specific. Just touch them and see what happens. Maria's hands hovered over the piano keys like birds afraid to land. Her heart was beating so fast that she could hear it in her ears. The keys looked so perfect and clean, and her hands looked so rough and worn from years of cleaning work. She wondered if she had the right to touch something so beautiful. Take your time, Jonathan said softly from behind her. There is no hurry. Maria stared at the keys and felt a flood of memories come back to her. She remembered being 7 years old in her grandmother's tiny house in Colombia. Her grandmother had an old broken piano that had belonged to Maria's great-aunt. Most of the keys did not work anymore, and it was so out of tune that it sounded terrible. But Maria had loved it anyway. Her grandmother would sit with her at that old piano every afternoon. Even though the piano barely worked, her grandmother would show her where to put her fingers. She would hum the melodies while Maria pressed the few keys that still made sound. Her grandmother could not read music either, but she had learned to play by ear when she was young. Music is not in the books, Mijita, her grandmother used to say. Music is in your heart. If you can feel it in your heart, your hands will know what to do. Maria had believed her grandmother back then. She had spent hours at that broken piano. Imagining that it sounded beautiful, she would close her eyes and pretend she was playing in a big concert hall just like this one. She would dream that someday she would have a real piano and would make real music. But then her grandmother died, and the old piano was sold to help pay for the funeral. Maria's family was very poor, and they needed the small amount of money more than they needed the broken instrument. Maria was only 12 years old, and she cried for days when the piano was taken away. After that, there was no money for music lessons. Maria had to help her mother take care of her younger brothers and sisters. She had to work after school to help the family buy food and pay rent. Music became something she only heard on the radio or in church on Sundays. When Maria grew up and came to America, she thought maybe she would have a chance to learn music again. But life was harder than she had expected. She had to work 2 jobs just to pay for her small apartment. She had to send money home to help her family in Colombia. There was no time or money left for music lessons. Getting the job at the concert hall 15 years ago had felt like a gift from God. At least she could be around music again, even if she could not make it herself. She could listen to rehearsals and concerts while she worked. She could be near the instruments she loved even if she could not play them. Now sitting at this magnificent piano, Maria felt like that 7-year-old girl again. She felt the same excitement and fear she had felt the first time her grandmother showed her the piano keys. But she also felt something else, doubt. What if her grandmother had been wrong? What if music was not really in Maria's heart? What if she had been fooling herself all these years? What if she sat here and tried to play and nothing beautiful happened? Maria, Jonathan said gently, what are you thinking about? My grandmother, Maria said without looking away from the keys. She taught me to love music when I was very little. She always said that music was in my heart, not in my hands. But maybe she was just being kind to a little girl. Tell me about her, Jonathan said. He pulled up a chair and sat beside the piano bench. Maria smiled for the first time since sitting down. She was a wonderful woman, very poor but very happy. She could make music out of anything. Pots and pans in the kitchen, spoons against the table, even just humming while she cooked. She said that God gave everyone a song and our job was to find it and share it. She sounds like a wise woman, Jonathan said. What do you think she would say if she could see you sitting here right now? Maria felt tears in her eyes. She would tell me to stop being afraid and to trust my heart. Jonathan nodded. I think she would be right. Maria took a deep breath and looked down at her hands. They were not the hands of a professional musician. They were rough and calloused from years of hard work. Her nails were short and practical, not long and elegant like the hands she had seen on famous pianists. But they were her hands, and they were the only hands she had. "What if I am terrible?" Maria asked again. "Then you will be terrible," Jonathan said with a smile. "And that will be okay. Everyone is terrible when they first try something new. I was terrible when I started playing piano. I could barely press one key at a time without hitting the wrong one." "Really?" Maria asked. "Really. My first piano teacher told my parents I had no talent and should try a different instrument. She said my fingers were too short and my timing was too poor." Jonathan laughed. "Sometimes the experts are wrong." Maria looked at Jonathan's hands. They looked strong and sure, like they belonged on piano keys. It was hard to imagine them ever being clumsy or uncertain. "But you became famous," Maria said. "You must have had natural talent." "Maybe," Jonathan said. "But talent without practice is useless, and practice without love is just noise. The most important thing is that you love the music. Everything else can be learned." Maria looked back at the keys. In the bright stage lights, they seemed to glow white and black, waiting for her to make her choice. She thought about her grandmother's words again. "Music is in your heart." Maybe it was time to find out if that was true. "Okay," Maria said quietly. "I will try." She lifted her right hand and held it over the keys. Her fingers were shaking a little, but she tried to remember how her grandmother had shown her to position her hand. Curved fingers, relaxed wrist like holding a small ball in her palm. "Good," Jonathan said. "Your hand position is actually very good. Someone taught you well." Maria felt a little surge of confidence. Maybe her grandmother's lessons had stayed with her after all these years. She pressed one key gently. It was a C note, clear and pure. The sound echoed in the big empty hall, and Maria felt a thrill go through her whole body. She had just made music on this incredible piano. "Beautiful," Jonathan said. "How did that feel?" "Amazing," Maria said, and she meant it. That one note had sounded better than any sound she had ever made in her life. She pressed another key, then another. Each note was clear and strong, filling the concert hall with sound. Maria had forgotten how good it felt to make music, even simple music like this. "Try using both hands," Jonathan suggested. "Just play whatever feels right." Maria put both hands on the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes and tried to remember the feeling of sitting at her grandmother's old piano. She tried to remember the songs her grandmother used to hum while they sat together. Slowly, very slowly, Maria began to play a simple melody. It was not a famous song or a difficult piece. It was just a tune she remembered from her childhood, something her grandmother used to hum while she cooked dinner. But even this simple melody sounded beautiful on the concert hall piano. The notes were rich and warm, and they filled the space around them with music. Maria felt like she was 7 years old again, sitting next to her grandmother and believing that anything was possible. Jonathan watched in amazement as Maria played. Her technique was not perfect. She had obviously never had formal lessons. But there was something special about the way she touched the keys. She played with feeling, with soul. She played like someone who truly loved music. "Maria," Jonathan said softly. "That was wonderful." Maria opened her eyes and looked at him with surprise. "Really? It was just a simple song." "It was not just a simple song," Jonathan said. "It was music. Real music. You have a gift, Maria, a real gift." Something magical happened when Maria's fingers found their confidence on the piano keys. The simple melody she had been playing began to change and grow. Without thinking about it, she started adding notes with her left hand. The childhood song her grandmother had hummed became richer and more complex under her touch. Jonathan felt goosebumps rise on his arms. This was not what he had expected at all. He had thought Maria might be able to play a few simple notes, maybe even a basic tune. But what he was hearing now was much more than that. Maria was not just pressing keys, she was making music. The melody flowed from Maria's fingers like water from a fountain. She played with her eyes closed, and her face showed the same peaceful expression that Jonathan had seen on the faces of master musicians. She was not thinking about technique or theory or what other people might think. She was just feeling the music and letting it come through her hands. As the simple childhood song came to an end, Maria did something that shocked Jonathan even more. Without stopping, she began to play another piece. This time, it was a song he recognized. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, one of the most beautiful and technically demanding pieces in the classical piano repertoire. Jonathan's mouth fell open. How could a cleaning lady with no formal training know this piece? But as he listened, he realized that Maria was not just playing the notes she had memorized. She was playing with understanding, with emotion, with the kind of deep musical feeling that many professional pianists spent years trying to develop. Maria's hands moved across the keys with surprising grace. Her rough, work-worn fingers found each note with precision and feeling. The melody sang out in the empty concert hall, filling every corner with beauty. This was not the playing of an amateur or a beginner. This was the playing of someone who truly understood music. The Chopin piece was known for its emotional depth. It started soft and gentle like a whispered secret. Maria played these opening notes with such tenderness that Jonathan felt his eyes fill with tears. How could someone who had never had lessons play with such feeling? As the piece continued, it became more complex and demanding. There were runs of fast notes that required excellent finger coordination. There were sections where both hands had to play independent melodies at the same time. These were techniques that usually took years of practice to master, but somehow Maria played through all of it. Her fingers flew over the keys with confidence and skill. She made the piano sing with a voice that was both technically excellent and deeply emotional. Jonathan had heard this piece played by some of the world's best pianists, but he had never heard it played with more heart than Maria was playing it right now. When Maria reached the most difficult section of the piece, Jonathan held his breath. This was where most amateur pianists would struggle or make mistakes. The notes came fast and required perfect timing and finger strength. But Maria played through it as if she had been practicing it for years. The music swelled and grew, filling the concert hall with waves of sound. Maria swayed slightly as she played, her whole body moving with the rhythm of the music. She looked like she was dancing with the piano, like the two of them were having a conversation that only they could understand. Jonathan realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. This was not just a cleaning lady playing piano. This was a true musician, someone with natural talent and deep musical understanding, finally getting the chance to show what she could do. As the Chopin piece came to its gentle, beautiful ending, Maria did not stop. Instead, she moved into another piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. This piece was completely different from the Chopin. It was dreamy and impressionistic like musical moonlight. It required a different kind of touch, a different kind of feeling. And Maria played it perfectly. Her fingers found the soft, floating quality that this piece demanded. She made the piano sound like it was singing a lullaby, like it was painting a picture of moonlight on water. The notes seemed to hang in the air for a moment before fading away, creating a sense of magic and mystery. Jonathan could not believe what he was hearing. These were two of the most famous and difficult pieces in the classical piano repertoire, and Maria was playing them both with the skill and feeling of a professional concert pianist. Where had she learned these pieces? How had she developed such technique without formal training? But even more amazing than her technical skill was the emotion in her playing. Every note carried feeling. Every phrase told a story. Maria was not just playing notes on a page. She was sharing her heart and soul through the music. As Clair de Lune reached its dreamy conclusion, Maria finally opened her eyes. She looked surprised, as if she had just woken up from a beautiful dream. She looked down at her hands on the keys, then up at Jonathan with wonder in her eyes. "I did that?" she asked softly. "That music came from me?" Jonathan could barely speak. He was still in shock from what he had just heard. "Maria," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That was incredible." "That was absolutely incredible." Maria looked confused. "But I was just playing songs I remembered. I was just feeling the music, just feeling the music," Jonathan repeated. "Maria, do you realize what you just played? Those were two of the most famous and difficult pieces in classical music, and you played them better than most professional pianists I know." Maria shook her head. "That cannot be right. I never had lessons. I do not know how to read music. I was just playing what I heard in my heart." Jonathan sat down heavily in his chair. He needed a moment to process what had just happened. "Maria, I need to ask you something important. Where did you learn to play like that? Those pieces you just played, where did you hear them?" Maria looked down at her hands, which were still resting on the piano keys. "I have heard them many times over the years working here. Different musicians have played them during rehearsals and concerts. I listened while I worked, and I guess I remembered them." "You learned those pieces just by listening?" Jonathan asked in amazement. I have a good memory for music, Maria said quietly. When I was little, my grandmother said I could remember any song after hearing it just once or twice. I thought everyone could do that. Jonathan shook his head. No, Maria, not everyone can do that. What you have is called perfect pitch and musical memory. It is very rare. Many professional musicians would give anything to have the natural abilities you have. Maria looked at Jonathan with disbelief. You really think I played well? Maria, Jonathan said seriously, I have been playing piano for over 30 years. I have heard the best pianists in the world. What you just did, that was not just playing well. That was extraordinary. That was the kind of playing that comes from pure natural talent combined with deep love for music. For the first time since she had sat down at the piano, Maria allowed herself to smile. It felt so good, she said. I felt like I was home. I felt like this was where I was supposed to be. Jonathan nodded. That is because it is where you are supposed to be. Maria, you are not just a cleaning lady who happens to like music. You are a musician, a real musician. Maybe one of the most naturally gifted musicians I have ever encountered. Maria felt tears streaming down her cheeks. For 15 years, she had told herself that music was not for people like her. For 15 years, she had believed that she was just dreaming impossible dreams. But now, sitting at this beautiful piano after playing music that touched her soul, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, her grandmother had been right all along. Maybe music really was in her heart, and maybe it was time for the world to hear it. Jonathan could not stop staring at Maria as she sat at the piano, tears still flowing down her cheeks. The empty concert hall seemed to vibrate with the music she had just played. He had goosebumps on his arms and a feeling in his chest that he had not experienced since he was a young boy hearing his first piano concert. Maria, he said softly, I need to know more about your story, what you just did. People do not just play like that without training. There is something you are not telling me. Maria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked embarrassed, like she had done something wrong by playing so well. I told you I never had real lessons. Just what my grandmother taught me when I was very small. Tell me about that, Jonathan said, pulling his chair closer to the piano. Tell me everything about your grandmother and your music. Maria took a deep breath. She had never told anyone her full story before. At work, people knew she was from Colombia and that she sent money home to her family. But nobody knew about her past, about the dreams she had given up, about the music that lived in her heart. My grandmother's name was Elena, Maria began. She was the most amazing woman I ever knew. She had very little money, but she had music everywhere. She would sing while she cooked, hum while she cleaned, tap rhythms on the table while she ate. Jonathan listened carefully as Maria continued. When I was very small, maybe 4 or 5 years old, my grandmother found an old piano at a church sale. It was broken and missing some keys, but she bought it anyway with the little money she had saved. She brought it to her house and put it in the living room, even though it took up most of the space. Maria's eyes got a distant look as she remembered. I was so excited about that piano. Even though it was broken and sounded terrible, I thought it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. My grandmother would sit with me every day after school and show me where to put my fingers. Did she know how to play? Jonathan asked, a little bit. She had learned some when she was young, before she got married and had children. She could not read music very well, but she had good ears. She taught me to listen to songs and figure out how to play them by trying different keys until they sounded right. Jonathan nodded. This explained a lot about Maria's natural ability to play by ear. We would sit at that broken piano for hours, Maria continued. My grandmother would hum a song and I would try to find the notes on the piano. When I got frustrated because the broken keys made it sound wrong, she would tell me to ignore the broken sounds and listen to the music in my heart. Smart woman, Jonathan said. Very smart. She told me that real music was not about having perfect instruments or perfect technique. She said real music was about feeling something so strongly that you had to share it with the world. Maria paused and looked at the beautiful piano in front of her. This piano is so different from that old broken one. But when I play it, I feel the same joy I felt sitting next to my grandmother. What happened to the piano? Jonathan asked. Though he suspected the answer would be sad, Maria's face fell. When my grandmother died, my family had no money for the funeral. We had to sell everything we could, including the piano. I was 12 years old, and I cried for weeks. It felt like losing my grandmother all over again. Jonathan felt a pain in his chest. He could imagine how devastating that must have been for a young girl who had just discovered her love for music. After that, there was no more music in my life, Maria said. My mother had to work 3 jobs to support our family. My father had left when I was small. I had to take care of my younger brothers and sisters and work after school to help pay for food and rent. Did you ever think about music during those years? Jonathan asked. Every day, Maria said immediately. I would hear songs on the radio and figure out how they would feel under my fingers. I would watch my brothers and sisters sleep at night and imagine playing lullabies for them. I would dream about having a real piano someday. Maria stood up from the piano bench and walked to the edge of the stage. She looked out at all the empty seats where thousands of people had sat to hear beautiful music over the years. When I was 18, I decided to come to America. I thought maybe here I would have a chance to study music, to make my dreams come true. But life was much harder than I expected. She turned back to face Jonathan. I worked in restaurants, cleaned houses, took care of other people's children. Every job paid very little, and I had to send most of my money home to help my family in Colombia. There was never enough left over for music lessons. Jonathan felt angry at the unfairness of it all. Here was a woman with incredible natural talent, someone who could have been a professional musician, and circumstances had forced her to spend her life cleaning other people's messes. How did you end up working here? He asked. 15 years ago, I saw a job advertisement in the newspaper. The concert hall needed cleaning staff for the night shift. When I came for the interview, I could hardly believe it was real. I would get paid to be around music even if I could not play it myself. Maria sat back down on the piano bench. The first night I worked here, there was a rehearsal for a Mozart concert. I had never heard music played live by professional musicians before. It was so beautiful that I had to stop working and just listen. I stood in the back of the hall and cried. Did anyone notice you listening? Jonathan asked. Mrs. Chen, my supervisor, found me crying and asked what was wrong. I was embarrassed and told her I was just tired. But she was very kind. She told me that many of the cleaning staff liked to listen to the rehearsals and it was okay as long as we did our work. Maria smiled. After that, I would plan my work schedule around the rehearsals and concerts. I would clean the areas near the stage so I could hear better. I learned the names of composers and pieces just by listening to them over and over. Jonathan was amazed. So you learned all those pieces you just played? The Chopin, the Debussy? Just by listening during rehearsals? Yes, over 15 years I heard them many times. Different musicians would play them, and each time I would notice something new about the music. I would go home and imagine playing them myself, but I never thought I actually could. Maria, Jonathan said seriously, do you realize what this means? You have been getting the equivalent of a masterclass education in classical music for 15 years. You have heard these pieces played by world-class musicians and your brain has been absorbing every detail. Maria looked confused. But I was just listening while I worked. Just listening? Jonathan laughed. Maria, most music students pay thousands of dollars to hear the quality of performances you have been hearing for free. And most of them do not have your natural ability to remember and understand what they hear. Jonathan stood up and began pacing excitedly. You have been training for 15 years without even knowing it. Your ears have been learning. Your musical memory has been developing, your understanding of interpretation and phrasing has been growing, and your natural talent has been waiting for the right moment to show itself. Maria felt overwhelmed. You really think I could be a real musician? Jonathan stopped pacing and looked directly at her. Maria, you already are a real musician. You may not have a diploma or formal training, but what you just played proved that you have something more valuable than any degree. You have natural talent, deep musical understanding, and years of unconscious training. He paused. The question is not whether you could be a musician. The question is what you want to do about it now. Maria felt her heart racing. For 15 years, she had told herself that her dreams were impossible. But sitting here at this beautiful piano, having just played music that came from her soul, she began to believe that maybe her dreams were not impossible after all. Maybe it was not too late. Maybe she could still become the musician she had always dreamed of being. What do you think I should do? She asked Jonathan quietly. Jonathan smiled. I think, he said, that it is time for the world to hear your music. Jonathan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He had been so amazed by Maria's playing that an idea was forming in his mind. But first he needed to capture what he had just witnessed. He needed proof of this incredible moment, not just for himself but for the world. Maria, he said carefully, would you mind playing one more piece for me? Maria looked at him with curiosity. Of course. What would you like to hear? Whatever you want to play. Something that means something special to you. Maria thought for a moment. There was one piece that always made her think of her grandmother, one that she had heard many times over the years but had never tried to play. It was Bach's Air on the G string, a piece so beautiful and pure that it always brought tears to her eyes. There is a Bach piece, she said softly. I have always loved it, but I have never tried to play it before. Then this will be perfect, Jonathan said, a completely fresh interpretation. What Maria did not notice was that Jonathan had quietly started recording on his phone. He held it casually at his side, not wanting to make her nervous. He had a feeling that what was about to happen would be important, and he wanted to make sure it was captured. Maria placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes. She thought about her grandmother, about all the years of dreaming and hoping. She thought about the broken piano in her grandmother's living room and how even then, the music had felt real and beautiful. Then she began to play. The first notes of Bach's Air on the G string flowed from the piano like honey. The melody was simple but profound, each note perfectly placed and filled with emotion. Maria played with a gentleness that made the music sound like a prayer. Jonathan felt chills run down his spine. Bach was notoriously difficult to play well because the music was so exposed. Every note mattered, and there was nowhere to hide mistakes or lack of understanding. But Maria was playing with the kind of pure, clear interpretation that some musicians spent their entire careers trying to achieve. The piece continued to unfold under Maria's fingers. She played with perfect timing, never rushing or dragging the tempo. Her touch was so controlled that each note sang with exactly the right amount of volume and expression. This was not just technical skill. This was deep musical understanding. As the melody moved into its more complex sections, Maria navigated every challenge with ease. Her left hand provided a steady, supportive foundation, while her right hand sang the beautiful melodic line. The two hands worked together like they had been playing this piece for years. Jonathan recorded every note, every nuance, every moment of this extraordinary performance. He could see that Maria was completely lost in the music, playing from some deep place in her soul that connected her to the composer and to the universal language of music. When the piece came to its gentle, perfect ending, Maria sat quietly for a moment with her hands still on the keys. The last note seemed to hang in the air of the empty concert hall like stars in the night sky. That was, Jonathan started to say, then found he could not finish the sentence. He was too moved by what he had just heard. Maria opened her eyes and looked at him. How was it? She asked. It was perfect, Jonathan said simply. Absolutely perfect. He looked down at his phone and saw that he had recorded over 8 minutes of Maria's playing. The video showed her sitting at the magnificent piano, completely absorbed in making music. Even from his casual recording position, the audio quality was surprisingly good. The piano's rich sound had been captured clearly. Jonathan made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Jonathan sat in his apartment looking at the video on his phone. He had watched it 10 times already, and each time he was more convinced that the world needed to see this. Maria's story was too important to keep secret. Her talent was too extraordinary to remain hidden. He opened his social media accounts and began to write a caption for the video. Last night I forgot something at the concert hall and went back to get it. I found one of the cleaning staff working late, and we started talking about music. On impulse, I asked her if she wanted to try playing the piano. What happened next will restore your faith in the power of dreams and the universality of music. Jonathan paused, thinking about Maria's story. He wanted to share it in a way that honored her dignity and her incredible journey. He continued writing. This is Maria. She has been cleaning our concert hall for 15 years, listening to rehearsals and concerts while she worked. She never had formal piano lessons, but she learned these pieces just by listening. What you're about to hear is pure natural talent combined with years of unconscious learning and a deep love for music. Jonathan posted the video with the caption and tags like "Draw Our Hidden Talent," a classical music and inspiring stories, and never give up on dreams. Then he put his phone down and went to make coffee, not expecting much to happen. He was very wrong. By lunchtime, the video had 500 views and 20 comments. People were amazed by Maria's playing and moved by her story. By dinner time, it had 5,000 views and 200 comments. People were sharing it with friends and family. By the next morning, the video had 50,000 views. Comments were pouring in from all over the world. This made me cry. What a beautiful soul. I have been playing piano for 20 years, and this woman plays better than me. Incredible. Please tell me someone is going to help her pursue music professionally. This is what real talent looks like. I shared this with everyone I know. The world needs to hear this story. Jonathan's phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. The video was being shared on other social media platforms. Music blogs were writing about it. Classical music websites were featuring Maria's story. By the end of the week, the video had over 2 million views. It had been shared tens of thousands of times. News outlets were calling Jonathan asking for interviews. Record labels were reaching out wanting to know more about Maria. But the most important response came from ordinary people around the world who were moved by Maria's story and her music. They saw in her everything they loved, about the power of dreams and the universality of art. They saw proof that talent and passion could overcome any obstacle. Jonathan knew he needed to find Maria and tell her what was happening. He knew her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. But first, he needed to make sure she was ready for what was coming. The cleaning lady who had spent 15 years listening to music in the shadows was about to step into the spotlight. And the world was waiting to hear what she had to say. Jonathan looked at the video one more time. Maria sat at the piano, completely absorbed in her music, unaware that millions of people around the world were about to fall in love with her story. She looked peaceful and happy, like she was exactly where she belonged, and maybe Jonathan thought she finally was. Maria had no idea her life was about to change completely when she arrived at work the next evening. She pushed her cleaning cart through the same hallway she had walked for 15 years, thinking about the magical night when she had finally played the concert hall piano. Part of her wondered if it had all been a dream. Mrs. Chen was waiting for her near the employee entrance with an expression Maria had never seen before. Her supervisor looked excited and nervous at the same time. "Maria," Mrs. Chen said, "I need to talk to you before you start work tonight. Something very unusual has happened." Maria felt worried. Had someone seen her playing the piano? Was she in trouble? "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. No, nothing wrong," Mrs. Chen said quickly. "But there have been phone calls all day. Reporters, music people, record companies. They are all asking about you." Maria looked confused. "About me? Why would anyone call about me?" Mrs. Chen pulled out her phone and showed Maria a video. It was her sitting at the concert hall piano playing Bach's Air on the G string. Maria could hardly believe what she was seeing. "Mr. Mills recorded you playing last night," Mrs. Chen explained. "He posted it on the internet with your story." "Maria, millions of people have watched this video. Millions of people around the world have heard you play." Maria felt dizzy. She sat down heavily in a nearby chair. "Millions of people? The phone has been ringing all day," Mrs. Chen continued. "News stations want to interview you. Music schools are offering you scholarships. A recording company called 3 times asking how to reach you." Maria stared at the phone screen, watching herself play piano. The comments below the video were in many different languages, but they all seemed to be saying positive things. People were using words like beautiful, amazing, and inspiring. "I do not understand," Maria said. "I just played some songs. Why do so many people care?" Mrs. Chen sat down next to her. "Because your story gives people hope. Because your music is beautiful. Because you prove that dreams can come true even when everything seems impossible." Over the next few hours, Maria's phone rang constantly. Jonathan had given Mrs. Chen Maria's number, and word had spread quickly through the music world. Famous musicians were calling to congratulate her. Music teachers were offering free lessons. Concert halls were asking if she would like to perform. The most surprising call came from the director of the city's most prestigious music conservatory. "Ms. Santos," the director said, "I watched your video and I must tell you that your playing is extraordinary. We would be honored to offer you a full scholarship to study with our best piano professors." Maria could not speak for a moment. A full scholarship to music school had been her biggest dream when she was young, but she had thought it was impossible for someone her age with no formal training. "But I am 45 years old," Maria finally said. "I have never read music. I do not know if I belong in a school with young, trained musicians." "Ms. Santos," the director replied, Talent like yours does not care about age, and the passion you show in your playing is something we cannot teach in any classroom. If you are willing to learn, we are willing to teach." The next few days passed like a whirlwind. Maria took time off from her cleaning job to meet with music teachers, reporters, and representatives from record companies. Everyone wanted to hear her story and listen to her play. The hardest part was believing that it was all real. For 15 years, Maria had cleaned in the shadows while others made music in the light. Now suddenly she was the one people wanted to hear. Jonathan became her guide through this new world. He helped her understand the contracts people wanted her to sign. He introduced her to honest music teachers and managers. Most importantly, he reminded her that her music was a gift she should share, not something she should be afraid of. "You have spent 15 years preparing for this moment without even knowing it," he told her. "Trust yourself. Trust your music." 3 months after that magical night at the piano, Maria gave her first official concert. It was held at the same concert hall where she had worked as a cleaning lady. The same stage where she had first discovered her gift was now set up for her debut as a professional musician. Every seat in the hall was sold. People had come from all over the city to hear the cleaning lady, who had become famous for her extraordinary piano playing. In the audience were her fellow cleaning staff, proud to see their colleagues succeed. There were music students who wanted to learn from her example. There were ordinary people who had been moved by her story. Maria wore a simple but elegant black dress instead of her cleaning uniform. Her hair was styled nicely and she looked beautiful. But the most important change was in her face. She looked confident and happy, like someone who had finally found where she belonged. Jonathan had the honor of introducing her to the audience. He walked out on stage and spoke into the microphone. 3 months ago, I came back to this hall late one night to get something I had forgotten. I found Maria Santos cleaning this very stage, and I asked her if she would like to try playing our piano. What happened next changed both our lives forever." He gestured toward the wings where Maria was waiting. "Tonight, Maria is not here as a cleaning lady who happens to play piano. She is here as a professional musician, sharing her gift with the world. Please welcome Maria Santos." Maria walked out onto the stage she had cleaned thousands of times, but now she walked as a performer, not a worker. The audience applauded loudly and many people stood up to show their respect. She sat down at the same piano where her journey had begun. For a moment she thought about her grandmother, who had always believed that music was in Maria's heart. She wished her grandmother could see this moment. Then Maria began to play. She started with the same Chopin nocturne she had played that first night with Jonathan. But now she played it for an audience of people who had come specifically to hear her music. The hall fell completely silent except for the beautiful sounds coming from the piano. Maria played with even more confidence and emotion than she had that first night. The months of lessons and practice had improved her technique, but her natural musicality remained the same. She played Bach, Chopin, Debussy, and other pieces she had learned over the years just by listening. But she also played some pieces she had composed herself, simple melodies that came from her own heart and experiences. When the concert ended, the audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. People were crying, cheering, and clapping with enthusiasm. Maria had not just played well, she had touched their hearts with her music and her story. After the concert, Maria was surrounded by people who wanted to congratulate her and thank her for sharing her gift. Music students asked for her autograph. Other musicians welcomed her into their community. Record company representatives talked about recording contracts and future concerts, but the moment that meant the most to Maria came when Mrs. Chen approached her backstage. "Maria," her former supervisor said with tears in her eyes, "I have worked at this concert hall for 20 years, and I have never been more proud of anyone than I am of you tonight." Maria hugged Mrs. Chen tightly. "Thank you for always being kind to me, for letting me listen to the music while I worked." "You were never just listening," Mrs. Chen said. "You were learning. You were preparing. You were becoming the musician you were always meant to be." As Maria left the concert hall that night, she passed by the storage room where she used to keep her cleaning cart. The cart was still there, but it belonged to someone else now. Maria had a new life, a new career, and a new future. She thought about all the nights she had worked in this building, dreaming of making music, but never believing it was possible. She thought about her grandmother's words. "Music is in your heart, mijita. If you can feel it in your heart, your hands will know what to do. Her grandmother had been right all along. The music had always been in Maria's heart, waiting for the right moment to be shared with the world. It had taken 15 years and a chance meeting with a kind pianist, but Maria's dreams had finally come true. As she walked out into the night air, Maria could hear the sound of her own music still echoing in her memory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new music to learn. But tonight she was simply a woman who had discovered that it is never too late to follow your dreams. The cleaning lady had become a concert pianist. The dreamer had become a musician, and the world was a more beautiful place because Maria Santos had finally found the courage to share her gift.